Welcome to Mental Flight, where bold ideas take off and untold truths soar beyond the limits of ordinary thinking. Then fasten your mind, you're cleared for takeoff. Ghana's recent decision to cancel a $1.2 billion bauxite deal has ignited a powerful conversation across Africa and beyond, and none other than Ibrahim Traoré, the bold leader of Burkina Faso, has reacted publicly in support of the move. The deal, once framed as a pathway to industrial growth and economic development, was scrapped amid growing concerns about foreign control, resource exploitation, and long-term sovereignty. Traoré's response to Ghana's action is more than just commentary. It reflects a growing continental wave of resistance against neo-colonial economic arrangements that have drained Africa's wealth for decades. Known for his uncompromising stance on African independence, Traoré has applauded Ghana's decision as a pivotal moment in the continent's economic awakening. His reaction wasn't laced in diplomatic politeness. It was charged with revolutionary clarity, reinforcing a shared vision of a self-reliant Africa, where nations are no longer bound by unfair contracts and unequal partnerships. The canceled bauxite deal was originally intended to monetize one of Ghana's most valuable natural resources in exchange for infrastructure development. But critics argued it lacked transparency and placed too much control in the hands of foreign entities with little long-term benefit to the Ghanaian people. In many ways, Traoré sees this cancellation not as an economic loss, but as a strategic victory, a break from dependency, and a return to African-led decision-making. For him, and for a growing number of African leaders and citizens, the real wealth lies not in signing billion-dollar deals, but in ensuring that Africa's resources serve African interests first. This philosophy echoes Traoré's own policies in Burkina Faso, where he has rejected exploitative mining contracts and prioritized national ownership over quick financial gain. Its alignment with Ghana's move strengthens a narrative that's becoming more visible across West Africa, a united front against external economic domination. The news spread. Traoré's reaction was amplified on social platforms and among Pan-African voices who see in him a symbol of youthful defiance and focused leadership. The cancellation has also reignited debates around the value of natural resource extraction in Africa. Who controls it? Who benefits from it? And what future models could finally flip the script? Traoré has consistently argued that Africa's riches should no longer be auctioned off to the highest foreign bidder, but harnessed strategically for the people who live on the land. Ghana's decision to cancel this deal plays directly into that vision. It sends a clear message that Africa is starting to choose dignity over dependency and long-term sovereignty over short-term gain. It is this mindset that Traoré champions. With every speech, every policy, and now with every reaction to major decisions like this one. As global powers continue to watch developments in Africa with growing interest and unease, moments like these make one thing clear: the continent is no longer silent. And its leaders, like Ibrahim Traoré, are no longer willing to play by the old rules. Ghana's decision is just one chapter, but combined with the momentum Traoré is building, it may be the beginning of a continent-wide rewrite. Ibrahim Traoré praises Ghana's cancellation of the $1.2 billion bauxite deal as a stand against foreign exploitation. This reaction from the Burkinab leader is not just symbolic, it represents a growing ideological shift in West Africa. When Ghana announced the abrupt cancellation of a $1.2 billion bauxite agreement, many were caught off guard. But for Ibrahim Traoré, it was a long overdue declaration of economic independence. Traoré, known for his unapologetic resistance to neo-colonialism, immediately hailed the move as courageous and necessary, echoing sentiments he's championed since rising to power. To him, Ghana's decision wasn't just a financial recalibration. It was a public refusal to continue Africa's legacy of economic surrender to foreign corporations and governments. The deal in question was originally promoted as a pathway to rapid industrialization. In exchange for access to Ghana's vast bauxite reserves, foreign partners pledged to build infrastructure and inject capital into the local economy. On paper, it seemed like a win-win scenario. But in reality, it reflected the same pattern. that has dominated African resource deals for decades, outsiders extracting the wealth while locals receive temporary jobs, minimal royalties, and long-term environmental damage. Traoré has warned against this model repeatedly, labeling it as exploitation in disguise. His praise for Ghana's bold move reinforces his belief that African leaders must stop trading long-term sovereignty for short-term projects. For Traoré, this is personal. Since taking power in Burkina Faso, he has actively resisted mining contracts that resemble the very deal Ghana just rejected. His government has begun re-evaluating foreign partnerships, particularly in the gold and mineral sectors, and insisting on new terms that prioritize national control and community benefit. Traoré's administration even paused certain contracts until full audits could be conducted, a move that sparked criticism from foreign investors but admiration from Pan-African circles. His stance has earned him the image of a leader unafraid to challenge the old order, and his reaction to Ghana's bauxite decision only cements that identity. Ghana's action is seen by Traoré and others as more than an isolated policy change, a ripple in a much larger tide of resistance sweeping across the Sahel and beyond. The shared history of colonialism has left African nations vulnerable to economic manipulation disguised as development aid or investment. Traoré views each refusal to engage in exploitative deals as an act of reclaiming dignity. When Ghana canceled this deal, it didn't just stop a project, it sent a message to the world that African nations are waking up to the real cost of foreign-funded promises. The significance of Traoré's reaction is also rooted in timing. Africa is currently experiencing a generational shift in leadership. Young, assertive figures like Traoré are stepping onto the stage with new energy and unfiltered resolve. They're no longer content with maintaining diplomatic niceties while their country's resources are drained. Ghana's move resonates with this new mindset, and Traoré's praise is a public endorsement of it. It encourages other leaders to reconsider similar deals in their own countries, especially those involving critical minerals like cobalt, gold, lithium, and oil. Traoré's support isn't just moral, it's strategic. He understands that isolated decisions, while powerful, are not enough. What Africa needs is coordinated resistance and collective bargaining power. Ghana's stand could become a rallying point, a case study in how to push back without collapsing under economic pressure. With his voice added to the conversation, the move gains international weight, drawing attention to the possibility of a new Pan-African economic front that challenges the dominance of Western and Chinese interests in Africa's mining and infrastructure sectors. This alignment between Ghana's action and Traoré's principles also reveals an evolving political culture in Africa, one that demands accountability, transparency, and above all, control over national assets. For too long, foreign companies have exploited loopholes, paid negligible taxes, and exported profits while leaving behind damaged lands and disillusioned communities. Traoré's praise highlights the fact that leaders are now less willing to tolerate this dynamic. The days when governments signed billion-dollar contracts without scrutiny or sovereignty are ending. Instead, leaders are beginning to view their resources as leverage, not liabilities. In the context of Ibrahim Traoré's broader philosophy, Ghana's decision reflects the kind of assertiveness he believes all African nations must adopt. His reaction isn't performative, it's part of a larger doctrine he has consistently followed. Africa must be the author of its own future. To do that, it must first control its resources, its trade, and its political will. The cancellation of a foreign-dominated bauxite deal aligns perfectly with that mission. Traoré sees it as a necessary sacrifice to protect long-term autonomy. It's about more than dollars. It's about self-respect, identity, and liberation from a system designed to keep Africa economically dependent. This move by Ghana validates what Traoré has been saying all along: a foreign contract is worth the price of losing control over national destiny. The scrapped deal signals a growing movement toward African resource sovereignty and economic self-determination. Across the continent, a historic awakening is taking place, one rooted in reclaiming ownership of Africa's vast natural wealth. In rewriting the terms of engagement with the outside world, The decision by Ghana to cancel a $1.2 billion bauxite deal is not just a national policy shift. It is a powerful symbol of a broader transformation. For decades, African nations have been locked in cycles of dependency, trading away raw resources. Under contracts shaped by foreign interests, these agreements often promised infrastructure, jobs, and investment, but delivered control, debt, and long-term disadvantage. Now, with Ghana's bold rejection of this deal, the message is echoing across Africa. The era of one-sided partnerships is coming to an end. This movement toward resource sovereignty is being driven by a new generation of African leaders and thinkers who recognize that controlling natural assets is fundamental to true independence. They understand that political sovereignty without economic autonomy is a hollow illusion. Ghana's decision reflects this consciousness of refusal to let its bauxite be mined and exported under conditions that strip the country of agency, profit, and long-term development. The government's move represents more than a rejection of one contract. It is a deliberate act of self-determination. It shows that African nations are beginning to see themselves not as suppliers of raw material to the world, but as rightful owners of strategic resources, whose value must be captured and retained locally. Across West Africa and the Sahel, similar shifts are gaining traction. Countries like Burkina Faso, under leaders such as Ibrahim Traoré, are already challenging exploitative gold and mineral deals, demanding renegotiations and tightening regulations around foreign corporate access to mines. Mali and Niger have taken steps to nationalize portions of their extractive industries, while even larger economies like Nigeria and South Africa are re-examining the frameworks through which foreign investors operate. These actions are not coordinated through treaties or unions. They are connected by a common realization that Africa's raw wealth must serve its people first. They are part of a growing philosophy that sees Africa not as a passive partner in global economics, but as a central force with leverage to dictate its own terms. What makes this movement unique is its grassroots energy. It is not merely a political agenda handed down by elites. It is being driven by public demand, community, activists, economists, and young voices calling for change. Africans are asking why their countries remain poor while their land produces gold, oil, diamonds, cobalt, and bauxite. They are demanding accountability from their governments and transparency in deals signed behind closed doors. The cancellation of Ghana's bauxite deal speaks directly to that pressure. It is a response to years of growing discontent and rising public consciousness. It shows that leaders are beginning to listen, and that domestic populations now have the power to influence decisions once made unilaterally, economically. The shift toward resource sovereignty also reflects a maturing understanding of value chains. Exporting raw materials has kept Africa at the bottom of the global economic ladder for generations. The wealth is created when those materials are processed, manufactured, and sold at much higher prices in other countries. By halting deals that offer only extraction and export, African nations are signaling a desire to climb that value chain to refine, process, and manufacture their own resources at home. And that requires investment in industry, education, and infrastructure. But it also requires controlling who gets access to what, under what conditions. Ghana's move is a declaration that the rules of access are changing, and that future deals must align with national development goals rather than foreign profit margins. The shift also carries deep historical significance. For centuries, Africa's relationship with the world has been shaped by extraction, first by colonial empires, then by multinational corporations. That legacy has left behind a system where African nations often depend on foreign loans, aid, or investment to develop, the very resources that lie beneath their feet. The push for resource sovereignty is a rejection of that legacy. It is about breaking free from financial systems and political structures designed to perpetuate dependence. Ghana's cancellation of the bauxite deal becomes a powerful statement. In this historical context, refusal to repeat the patterns of the past, and a commitment to forging a new path rooted in self-reliance. This growing movement is not without its challenges. Canceling large-scale deals can provoke economic retaliation, diplomatic pressure, or investment slowdowns. Countries that take bold steps risk isolation from Western financial systems and media backlash. Wrote, but the long-term rewards control. Dignity and true wealth creation are beginning to outweigh those short-term costs. African leaders increasingly recognize that the cost of staying dependent is far greater than the risks of standing up. Ghana's example may encourage others to reassess their deals, conduct audits, and ask difficult questions about who truly benefits from foreign investment. Internationally, this shift is being watched closely. Governments and corporations accustomed to operating freely in African markets are now encountering resistance. They are being asked to renegotiate, to increase their commitments to local communities, to accept terms that were once off the table. Some are pushing back, but others are adapting, realizing that the future of African business lies in partnership, not dominance. Ghana's bauxite cancellation sends a message to the global market that doing business in Africa now requires fairness, transparency, and respect for national interests. Ultimately, the rejection of the $1.2 billion bauxite deal is part of a continental narrative that is still unfolding. It marks a point where African nations are not just reacting to exploitation, but proactively reshaping the rules. From Accra to Ouagadougou, from Bamako to Lusaka, the idea of economic self-determination is no longer theoretical, it is becoming a policy reality. Ghana's choice may spark more than just headlines. It may inspire a generation to rise with the belief that Africa's resources are not a curse, but a key to building a future defined by African hands, African minds, and African power. Traoré's reaction reflects a broader Pan-African vision, rejecting neocolonial contracts and promoting continental unity. When Ibrahim Traoré responded to Ghana's decision to cancel a $1.2 billion bauxite deal, his words carried far more weight than a typical political endorsement. They were a rallying cry, a reaffirmation of a deeply rooted ideology that is sweeping through Africa's younger leadership and awakening a continent long burdened by exploitation. His reaction is not just about Ghana or a single region. This vision of continental unity is steeped in the legacy of African liberation movements, but it now takes a more economically grounded form. The enemy is no longer the flag of the colonizer, but the contract that continues to drain African wealth. Pan-Africanism today is not just about borders or politics. It's about building a new economic system that keeps the value of Africa's resources within the continent. Traoré sees every exploitative contract canceled and every unfair deal overturned as another brick laid in the foundation of a united African economic front. The more countries that follow Ghana's lead, the more collective leverage Africa will gain in setting its own terms globally. Traoré's endorsement also challenges the psychological remnants of colonialism. For too long, many African governments were conditioned to view outside approval as a prerequisite for legitimacy. They signed contracts that pleased international lenders or foreign investors, fearing that resistance would lead to sanctions, isolation, or economic collapse. Traoré's message is clear, that fear must end. True sovereignty means having the courage to make decisions based on national and continental interest, not foreign applause. His reaction to Ghana's decision is a public declaration that it is time to break the mental chains that have bound African leadership to external validation. Traoré's own governance style embodies this mindset. In Burkina Faso, he has pushed aggressively against foreign interference, demanding that military and economic policies be decided by Burkinabés. Elote. He's refused to renew exploitative contracts and questioned the legitimacy of international financial obligations inherited from past regimes. His rhetoric isn't just populist, it's revolutionary. By backing Ghana's rejection of a neo-colonial deal, he is reinforcing his broader message that the era of silent submission to foreign economic agendas is over. What makes this movement particularly powerful is that it is rooted in youth. Traoré himself is part of a new generation of African leaders who are not weighed down by colonial-era relationships. They speak with urgency, confidence, and an unflinching demand for change. This generational shift is evident not only in leadership, but also in public sentiment. Young Africans, increasingly aware of how much wealth is extracted from their soil, are no longer content with the narratives of patience and gradual reform. They want assertive leadership that is willing to tear up bad deals and replace them with partnerships that respect African sovereignty. Traoré's voice resonates with this demographic because he articulates what they feel, that Africa must stand tall. Together, Traoré's reaction also offers a blueprint for regional collaboration. Instead of competing for foreign investment, African countries could collaborate to protect and process their resources jointly. If one country faces retaliation for standing up to exploitation, its neighbors can offer support, trade, and shared infrastructure to reduce dependence on foreign actors. This model of mutual defense and shared prosperity reflects the true essence of Pan-Africanism unity, not just in culture or politics, but in action. Ghana's cancellation of the deal was one action. Traoré's support was another. Together, they represent steps toward a future where African nations no longer walk alone into battle against global giants, in an international system that often pits African countries against each other in a scramble for aid or approval. Traoré's endorsement of Ghana's sovereign decision is refreshingly disruptive. It invites African leaders to shift their focus from satisfying foreign expectations to aligning with each other's long-term goals. As more leaders begin to echo Traoré's rhetoric, as more nations reject neo-colonial contracts disguised as development deals, the architecture of a truly unified Africa begins to take form not in empty slogans, but in bold, coordinated actions that challenge the systems which have long kept the continent divided and dependent. If you believe Africa deserves to control its own destiny, and you're hungry for real stories the mainstream media won't show you, then this is your space. Tap subscribe to stay informed, empowered, and ahead of the narrative. And if this video gave you a new perspective, smash that like button. It tells the algorithm that truth still matters.